Hello, everyone. I'll just give another minute or so, and then we can get a couple more people in, and then we'll get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday today on May 7th, 2025. My name is Madison Lohman. I'm the Member Program Coordinator here at Digital Health Canada, and I will be your host for today. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we all call home. We gratefully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Please share in the chat the territory you're joining from. Today's webinar is AI-powered clinical decision support systems, potential, precautions, and practical considerations for primary care in Canada. And I would like to point out that this session is part of the Webinar Wednesday Healthcare Innovation Round series and has been certified for Main Pro Plus credit. It is my pleasure to introduce today our presenters. We have Dr. Mohammed Al-Arakia, who is the CEO of Amplify Care. We also have Jeremy Howcroft, who is the program manager at Amplify Care. We have Anne Dabrowski, who is the Director of Information Services at the Center for Effective Practice. And we have Diana Marsilio Apostoli, who is the manager at the Center for Effective Practice. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat section or the Q&A section, and we will get to them at the end of today's presentation. So thank you all for being here today. I will now pass the screen and the mic over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you so much, Madison, and pleasure to be here today. Thank you all for joining us over your lunch hour. We're really excited to be having this dialogue and to kind of bring this discussion to the Digital Health Canada Webinar Wednesday. I'll first quickly just give us a bit of an expectation on what our agenda is going to look like today. So first, we're going to set a little bit of a context. We're going to hear from Dr. Al-Arakia, who is going to describe the landscape of AI in primary care. We will then hand things over to the incredibly knowledgeable Anne and Diana over at the Center for Effective Practice to discuss the key considerations for implementing AI CDSS solutions. I will then close us off by doing a bit of a review of some practical applications that are available in Canada now. And then we'll be bringing you into the conversation and addressing any questions and discussion items that you would like to bring forward. So with that, I am happy to pass things over to Dr. Al-Arakia.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. And as you can hear, I'm a little bit hoarse in the voice, probably from cheering for all the Canadian hockey teams. But I'm going to try to amplify my voice, and Jeremy's going to chime in if I can't. And so great to be presenting to you on this today with the Center for Effective Practice. You will have noticed that the eHealth Center of Excellence have changed our brand to Amplify Care, which we're quite excited about, and we're really excited to amplify the voices of clinicians and amplify primary care. And we'll be talking about AI in primary care, which is quite an exciting area. So we'll go to the next slide, Jeremy. And just checking, Jeremy, you can hear me okay? Okay, good. And I just have a few slides, and this will make sure I don't talk too much. So that's a good thing. So AI, in terms of just sort of grounding ourselves, there are different technologies that are out there. There's automation, robotic process automation, which is not AI. It's algorithm based. It really just allows you to put rules into practice. And then there's artificial intelligence, which is where computers think like humans and solve problems. and subsets of artificial intelligence are machine learning and natural language processing, and you can see the definitions there. But this slide is really to tell you that really there are many different areas where these tools are moving forward, and there's lots of excitement around these tools, but there's also a need to have a framework to actually guide us in testing these tools, making sure they are good, and then getting them out into the field. And Jeremy's going to talk about some practical tools that are out there that are doing some really neat things. And so just very briefly, from a population health perspective, AI is being used to really look at predicting which patients are at risk or which patients may get a disease, and then we can proactively intervene on those patients. In terms of patient care, there are applications for patients where patients can get a question answered, and patients can get triaged in terms of their conditions, and triage to self-care or triage to seeing a clinician. In terms of practice, you've all likely heard about the great excitement around AI scribes and where that is going, and there's lots happening in that space. And then in terms of evidence and using evidence, and that's what we're going to talk about today in terms of decision support. And this is an area where we have to have great caution, but where there's promise to really helping us with the decisions that we need to make. And you sort of think about a family doctor having to understand all of these different conditions, and what if you had an AI agent that was helping you to say, hey, did you think about this diagnosis? Did you consider this as you're talking to a patient? So there's promise, but there's also, as we'll talk about, a precaution as well. We'll move to the next slide. And so just a few ways in which AI is already shaping primary care in terms of clinician burden. And so the study in Ontario showing 70% reduction in documentation time. There's a study coming out from work in British Columbia very soon in terms of how primary care, and actually in that case specialists as well, how AI scribes is helping or not helping for those clinicians. Artificial intelligence already looking at scheduling patients in for appointments automatically in the Ontario evaluation that saved about an hour a week. And then things like billing and data entry, AI and automation has a tremendous potential there, and there's references to those things that we can show later on. We'll move to the next slide. And already great questions sort of coming into the chat, so we'll make sure to address those. So in terms of personalized treatment, this is where I'm really excited in terms of, imagine a patient had a personal coach that looked at the patient's record, looked at the literature, and looked at patient materials, and really tailored it to the patient. There's some great technology out there. Google has a notebook, large language model where you can actually take something and it will tailor it to, say, an 8-year-old who has type 1 diabetes, which is a very difficult diagnosis to deal with, but it will make it right into the words that patient needs. And there's cool technologies that will actually make a video with whatever characters you want, like having a conversation about the diagnosis for a child. So it's really great in terms of how it can help us to make sure things are at the right level. Like patients walk out of my clinical office and they probably don't catch most of the things that I'm telling them, and it's great to have a tool to actually help them with that. We'll move to the next slide. In terms of looking at patient engagement, and so this is what I was talking about, really about helping patients understand their symptoms, self-assess symptoms, seek care where appropriate. And so there's lots of great opportunities there. And so we'll go to the next slide as well. And then in terms of decision support, so that's what we're going to spend the most of today talking about, is decision support tools and the roles and some of the challenges with them. How do we, at a population level, at a panel level, identify patients at risk and then take preventative interventions? And then some of the progress that's been made in terms of looking at images of a person's fundus, for example, and looking at diabetic retinopathy, but also some of the challenges we've seen where we thought, okay, I can take a picture of the back of someone's eye and you can get so many conditions and so much information, and then we realize that there's tremendous challenges with that, and really we need to be cautious about the promise there, because there are issues. And I think as in the chat, like, we need to look at Health Canada approval for some of these tools, because they do become a medical device at that stage. And so there is a lot of work that we need to do, but it shouldn't prevent us from in the with the right guardrails and safety nets, trying things out and really seeing if there's value or not, and evaluating those things. So, there is tremendous opportunity, but also we need to do it in the right way, and we'll talk about that through the presentation. We'll go to the next slide. And so really, if this is really what we want to put in the chat, I'd love you to put in the chat is what do you think is the potential for decision support in primary care? And I can look through those, and then later on we can sort of summarize what people think. There's questions about post-market surveillance. We know AI actually will change over time. It'll drift. The models will change, and so how do you keep on monitoring them? Like, what's the cadence of monitoring? And I was actually in Edmonton yesterday, which is probably one of the reasons why my voice is like this. And there was a great presentation on the ethical framework for AI, and looking at how do we look at these models, and what's the right cadence? Is it 3 to 6 months to actually continue to evaluate and monitor the performance of these tools, because they do change over time. And so that's important. In my view, the administrative things for AI will move faster, as we've seen documentation, supporting patient information, and transmitting that information, and then the decision support tools will follow later. But there will be some great opportunity for AI assistance to give the clinician insight, and at the end of the day, the clinician makes the decision. But we need to test those things out. So if you have any thoughts about where this is going or what you've seen, we'd love to see that in the chat, and we'll sort of circle back later on. I'm now we'll go to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to our colleagues at CEP to take over on this part.
Thank you so much, and hello everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm very happy to be here, and again, thank you for attending. I'm Diana, and I'm a manager at the Center for Effective Practice, working with our fantastic AI Learning Center team, Taylor Moore, who's an information coordinator, and Ann Dabrowski is director of our information services. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to reorient us to our learning objectives for this section and zoom in on AI CDSS, and I'll pass the microphone back to Ann. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So by the end of this webinar, we'd like you to be able to explain the core functions of AI-powered clinical decision support systems, contrast the regulatory status of AI CDSS, for instance, is it Health Canada approved versus unregulated, and identify resulting safety and accountability gaps. Be able to recognize key limitations and risks of AI CDSS, including bias, opacity, and performance drift, as it's already been mentioned, and be aware of practical evaluation criteria, so including bias, transparency, clinical autonomy, when assessing AI CDSS for use in practice. Next, please. So CDS or CDSS, we've heard both terms being used. So let's break it down. CDS is any aid that guides a clinician's decision. It improves decisions regardless of format. And CDSS is a software platform that delivers one or more CDS functions. So it automates CDS inside a digital workflow. For purposes of this presentation, we'll use CDSS. So we can move ahead. So let's zoom in, and why focus on AI-powered CDSS? Well, as we've been chatting about, CDSS is not just another AI use case. Unlike tools that automate paperwork or update patient leaflets, CDSS sits inside the diagnostic and treatment pathway, where errors can directly affect patient safety. Also, there are higher risk decisions, so they guide diagnoses and care plans, not clerical workflows. Any inaccuracy can propagate through the clinical record and downstream care. Using the classic iceberg analogy, the visible tip of the iceberg represents the visible lower risk AI tasks, such as paperwork and clinical workflows. However, what is not visible is how CDSS functions beneath the surface to influence diagnosis and treatment. So with AI in the mix, we cannot fully see how an AI CDSS tool arrived at its output. And we'll touch more on that later. Next, please. So CDSS, again, are digital tools designed to assist clinicians by providing relevant clinical evidence, patient data, and other insights at the point of care. These systems enhance decision-making by offering timely, data-driven information to improve patient outcomes. CDSS aim to support one or both of these two core functions, the first one being what is true, where it provides advice based on a fixed set of data, such as inputted patient information or available clinical data, and or what to do, where it recommends the next steps in patient care, such as which tests to order for further diagnoses or which medication to prescribe based on the patient's current condition. These functions support clinicians to make informed decisions efficiently and effectively. Next, please. So if we're looking at this spectrum, let's look at the different types of CDSS. First, we have information management. And these tools help organize and present clinical data to guide decision-making. The focus here is on answering what is true. So examples would be clinical knowledge repositories and drug reference platforms. Then moving along, we have basic CDSS. These tools highlight critical clinical data to focus attention. They answer what is true and sometimes what to do. Examples would be lab systems highlighting critical values or pharmacy systems flagging drug interactions. And then finally, we have the more complex advanced CDSS, and these tools provide tailored patient-specific recommendations. They answer both what is true and what to do. Examples of this would be adjusting medication doses, predicting risks for adverse events, or recommending diagnostic tests. So next, please. And then finally, CDSS can be knowledge-based or non-knowledge-based. Knowledge-based meaning that the system pulls data to assess the rule and generates a corresponding action or outcome. These rules can be derived from literature-based, practice-based, or patient-specific evidence. Non-knowledge-based CDSS still require a data source, but make decisions using AI, machine learning, or statistical pattern recognition instead of following predefined expert medical knowledge. So just one, thank you. AI and non-AI CDSS can both be either knowledge-based or non-knowledge-based. The key distinction lies not in the presence of a knowledge base, but in how the system processes and applies the information. And how the system processes and applies the information can impact how effectively the CDSS can support clinicians in making accurate real-time decisions. Thank you so much. I'll now pass it over to Anne.
Thank you, Di. So what I'm going to talk about, as Di was laying out, clinical decision support systems typically historically provide guidance built on rules and predefined pathways. And so when we introduce AI into the process, we shift into a world of probabilistic reasoning, real-time learning, and large-scale pattern recognition, which, as we've been saying, is powerful, but it's also risky. AI-enhanced CDSS can adapt quickly and, in theory, personalize care, but it also opens the door to new forms of error and unintended consequences and bias. So today we're going to explore what's possible, but also what we need to be cautious about. So Jeremy, if you'll move to the next slide. Okay. So at the heart of safety issues regarding AI and clinical decision support is this, that the effectiveness and clinical safety of any tool is directly impacted by the quality, transparency, and underlying data and design. So the old phrase, garbage in, garbage out for data applies here, but in a much more layered and complex way. So different types of AI models have different strengths and limitations. And sometimes those are either mitigated or exaggerated depending on where they are deployed in the process. So thoughtfully designed tools with clinical effectiveness and safety in mind from the earliest stages of the design process will have significant impacts on how well the tool functions for its specified purpose. So a simple example of this is about when to deploy something like a large language model. So it processes language and patterns very quickly, but it struggles with accuracy and can often mix up information or confuse context, and of course, invent details, which are called hallucinations. So even if you have the strongest data and evidence in the world, if you put a large language model on top of it as a chat interface, that will introduce significant likelihood of error, regardless of the strength of the information underneath it. So a more thoughtful approach would be about how and when a language model or natural language processing could be used strategically to make the most out of its benefits while mitigating its limitations. Next slide, please. And Jeremy, in a second, I'm going to have you click because this one's got animation. So look out, world. So discussions of limitations with AI can feel very abstract. So here are some examples of how known limitations that can affect AI-powered CDSS would look manifesting in day-to-day care. So, for example, a hospital could use an AI scheduling tool that prioritizes patients for follow-up based on their engagement in the past. So prioritizing patients who have engaged more in the past. Therefore, it will also be the flip side of that coin is deprioritizing people who have engaged less. And in that moment, the algorithm has now automated an access barrier that codifies less timely access for people with access barriers for people who have struggled with engagement, for instance, those without regular internet access. Another example, a couple of these are about how pattern recognition is not a benefit in and of itself. So AI models aren't heat-seeking missiles for only good patterns. They find and perpetuate harmful patterns with equal power. So a pain management AI-powered CDS system that was trained on biased historical data would be likely to underprescribe, for instance, to Black patients. Similarly, not all data is good data. Medical research is known to skew towards white male subjects. And so a diagnostic tool that sort of blindly reads and processes results from skewed data could, for example, miss signs of a heart attack in a woman if its training data is skewed male. And lastly, we have hallucinations. So in a profession like medicine where details are so important, every clinician should be aware of whether an AI tool they use has a large language model component, as it is only this type of model that hallucinates and invents details. So Jeremy, if you want to click, you can have our animation come sailing in, and you can, oh, I thought they were coming at the same time. So you can click through, and bam. Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we want to leave lots of time for discussion. So I'm not going to go into this slide too much. We're just going to highlight kind of the confusing regulatory space we are in. So Health Canada, for example, came out with this guidance in February that provides a really great overview of requirements for vendors in developing medical devices. And the design and quality specifications that are laid out are exactly the kind of thing that would be important and necessary for clinicians and patients to really feel confident in AI-powered clinical tools. However, most, if not all, clinical decision support tools do not fall into the category that's subject to this guidance because they're not advertised as automating clinical decision-making. So if you'll skip to the next slide. And this is a really important distinction. So to be classified as a regulated medical device by Health Canada, the trigger is based primarily on the manufacturer's stated intent. So if the tool is explicitly described as being used for automating diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, or prevention of disease, it's likely to be regulated. In contrast, tools that heavily assist but leave, the last decision-making click to the clinician falls outside the scope of current regulation, even if they have significant clinical influence. So this gap allows really high impact tools to enter into care settings with no regulatory oversight, simply because of how they're described and whether this kind of last one click is left to the clinician. And when tools avoid regulation, there's no requirement for clinical validation, for transparency and auditability for clinicians, for performance monitoring, and this creates significant risks. Clinicians may unknowingly rely on tools that are inaccurate, biased, poorly tested, and that all potentially compromises patient care and puts clinicians in the seat of holding the liability. So next slide, please. So in the future, we may see regulation shift towards clinical impact, even for tools that are, more cautiously worded and don't fully automate everything. So we can kind of anticipate that there will be increased oversight as the risks of over-relying on unregulated tools become more visible. But when, how, we have, it's really hard to say how regulation will keep up with the pace of tools in the AI space. So now Jeremy is going to take it away to look at some tools that are currently on the market.
All right, thank you so much. So it's really important to be able to apply these clinical concepts carefully when considering options available today that have great potential to enhance predictive accuracy, enable personalized medicine, augmented clinical workflow, and improve patient engagement. But before we dive in, I also want to be clear that this is not at all an endorsement of any particular application. This is really just a discussion specifically only for educational purposes. So first, let's take a closer look at Cure Health. Cure ingests patients' charts and clinical notes and applies advanced machine learning, including natural language processing, large language models, and generative AI. The result is a clinical dashboard that helps identify patients with a specific condition and flags those who may be eligible for targeted care pathways. At its core, Cure is a basic clinical decision support system and answers both questions: what is true and what should I do? It doesn't just organize information, it filters it to highlight priority cases, helping clinicians focus on patients who might benefit most from intervention. While the tool is primarily driven by structured data, it can also provide limited guidance on next steps in care, such as recommending further testing or treatment aligned with a predetermined clinical pathway. Because Cure relies on machine learning, and especially generative AI, it is classified as a non-knowledge-based system. This brings important risks to consider. The system can potentially miss patients, what we've been calling gaps in recall. It can misinterpret data, which would be known as issues with precision, or even generate inaccurate insights, what we call hallucinations. So clinical oversight remains essential. And finally, it's important to note that Cure is not currently regulated as a machine learning enabled medical device. This is because it doesn't automate medical diagnosis or treatment decisions. As a result, it falls outside of Health Canada's existing regulatory guidance. Now let's take a look at Verto, another AI-powered tool that is supporting care delivery at scale. Verto ingests patient charts and free text clinical notes, converting them into a structured format to build what's called a digital twin, a complete standardized representation of the patient. This digital twin acts as a foundation to enable automated workflows, streamline case management, support clinical coding and risk scoring, and deliver population-level clinical decision support. At first glance, Verto might seem like an information management system, simply organizing data, but it actually goes a step further. By automating workflows and enabling the cohorting of patients based on specific conditions, it becomes a form of CDSS that not only shows what is true, but also supports what to do, particularly for managing populations of patients. As mentioned, it supports decisions around case management, care prioritization, and more. Verto uses machine learning techniques such as natural language processing and large language models. But notably, it avoids generative AI to reduce the risk of inaccuracy and hallucination. Even so, because it relies on learned patterns rather than fixed medical knowledge, it remains a non-knowledge-based system. This means it can still be susceptible to issues with recall, precision, and bias. Importantly, while Verto includes automated processes, currently those are strictly administrative in nature. Clinical decision-making, especially diagnosis and treatment, remains in the hands of healthcare providers. Because of this, Verto is also not regulated as a machine learning-enabled medical device and does not fall under Health Canada's current MLMD guidance. Now, let's shift to a different kind of AI solution, Hippo AI. Hippo AI is a conversational AI, much like ChatGPT, but with one crucial distinction. It only draws from authoritative, peer-reviewed sources rather than the entire internet. This helps ensure that the responses it provides are evidence-based. Users can ask clinical questions, receive a response grounded in medical literature, check references, and continue to explore follow-up questions within that trusted context. Because Hippo AI doesn't ingest or analyze patient data, except what a user manually includes in a question, it doesn't offer personalized clinical advice. Instead, its role is more aligned with information management. It retrieves, organizes, and presents clinical information to help support decision-making. Importantly, it limits its support to the what is true question, general facts and evidence, not necessarily what to do, which would require individualized context. Despite its focus on trustworthy sources, Hippo AI is still built on a large language model, which makes it a non-knowledge-based system. This means it doesn't understand medical knowledge the way a clinician does. It identifies patterns and predicts answers based on training data, which introduces familiar risks, bias, misinterpretation, and even hallucinated responses, particularly if a user's input is vague or incomplete. Because Hippo AI does not make clinical decisions or automate medical workflows, it doesn't meet the threshold to be classified as a machine learning-enabled medical device, and as such is currently not regulated under Health Canada's guidance. Now, let's look at IQVIA, a solution that represents one of the more advanced applications of AI-powered clinical decision support in primary care. IQVIA offers comprehensive support for the design, development, and deployment of clinical decision support tool programs. Their approach brings together multidisciplinary expertise to accelerate the identification of patients in need of intervention and to improve alignment with appropriate care pathways. They begin by identifying care gaps, build analytics to surface those gaps, then integrate seamlessly into the EMR via a Smart on Fire application, embedding directly into the clinician's workflow. IQVIA's tool goes beyond just presenting clinical information. It provides patient-specific treatment recommendation to help close those care gaps. That means ensuring patients are not missed, diagnosed too late, or left untreated. With this level of personalized insight and actionable guidance, IQVIA's solution qualifies as an advanced CDSS, capable of answering both what is true and what to do. The analytics engine behind IQVIA's tool is flexible. It may be knowledge-based, drawing on clinical guidelines, or in many cases, it is non-knowledge-based, using AI methods like natural language processing when deeper insights are needed. This includes extracting meaningful signals from unstructured data, such as social determinants of health, family history, or patient-reported outcomes, a process that requires more sophisticated, pattern-based algorithms. Although IQVIA's solution is powerful and embedded in clinical care, it does not automate medical decision-making. Because final decisions remain with remain clinician-led and no treatment is initiated without human oversight, it currently does not meet the threshold for Health Canada regulation. So let's close out this section by looking at Pentavere, a company taking a more academic and research-driven approach to AI-powered clinical decision support. Pentavere is best described as a patient identification company. At its core, is the Darwin AI engine, which uses natural language processing to analyze clinical documentation and identify patients eligible for specific treatments or interventions. This work has led to numerous peer-reviewed publications, with Darwin AI often used to demonstrate the real-world effectiveness of approved medications or care strategies in highly focused use cases. Unlike advanced CDSS tools, Pentavere's work is firmly in the realm of information management. It excels in identifying clinical patterns and surfacing relevant cases, but does not necessarily provide like real-time recommendations for treatment or guidance for clinicians. Its primary contribution is helping care teams understand the what is true question, but does not go so far as to suggest what to do. Pentavere's Darwin AI is non-knowledge based, relying on machine learning and NLP to recognize patterns in unstructured text. And like the other solutions we've discussed, because final clinical decisions are left to human experts and no automation of clinical processes occurs, Pentavere's solution is not regulated as a machine learning enabled medical device under the current Health Canada guidance. So with that kind of lightning round of looking at the practical applications, I'll turn things back over to Anne to take us home.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. So yes, we are in excellent time. We want to have lots of opportunity for conversations. So just some key takeaways from our two teams. Take a balanced approach. AI is becoming increasingly integrated in Canadian primary care settings. AI tools offer a lot of promise, but clinical decision support with AI is a high-risk application. Understand the AI hype and type. We've seen some questions about this in the chat. Tools use a lot of different models in different ways, and so it is really they vary from product to product in a way that is very difficult to keep track of. So they use non-knowledge-based AI, as Jeremy was saying, and this increases the risk of missing data, misinterpretation, inaccuracy. Critical thinking in selecting and using tools is your best safeguard. One of the things that we try to focus on a lot at CEP and that we try to share in our AI literacy education is that there is only so much that a user of one of these tools can do to assess the validity and safety of a tool, and that is part of the inherent issue. And why regulation is so important in this space is that it is virtually impossible, aside from some of the more transparent applications like a scribe, it is very difficult for someone using one of these tools to know whether in the moment, whether guidance coming to them is accurate, unless that's their area of expertise. And that's where there's sort of the black ice aspect of AI in CDS, is that even somebody who really intends to be very focused on safety and picking a tool that's safe for them, when AI tools are not transparent and not auditable, that makes it very difficult. So the last piece is try to know and follow the regulatory context. I think both of our orgs want to help and make it easier for clinicians to understand this as it changes. But as we laid out today, many AI CDSS tools currently avoid classification as medical devices and so are not regulated. This preserves clinician autonomy in theory, but it also puts the onus on the user to evaluate all outputs and information before acting on them. Thank you so much.
I think we're good to take questions now. And I know there's a bunch of things that sort of come into the chat, and there is some in the queue. I think one, yeah, a couple questions in the Q&A, but maybe Anna's been very patiently holding a hand up for a while. Your hand must be quite tired. I don't know if we can unmute Anna and do a verbal question. Madison, is that possible? Or
Let me just check.
okay, or Anna, if you're able to put into the chat, or see the hand came down now. I don't know. Oh, okay, it was raised by mistake. Okay, great. Um, so there's a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if Anne, there anyone that you want to answer in that. If you can see, sorry, the QA in the Q&A. The chat is a running stream of consciousness.
Sure. Well, it's Taylor. Do you want to tell us what's in the Q&A and raise some things to
Sure.
our notice?
Absolutely. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. We have a lot in the chat that we can get to, but I'll start off with one that we got earlier in the presentation. So when speaking about AI-enhanced CDSS, what type of AI is being used in these systems? Are they most likely language models or predictive models or a combination of both?
Mohammed, do you want to jump in? Because I will say the very untechnical, they are lots of different things all at once everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think that there are ways to sort of understand, I think as Jeremy was saying, um, uh, what medical knowledge is out there, and then there's ways of sort of processing it and using that to sort of say what should happen next for this patient. So I think it's all of the above, for sure.
Great. Okay, so a couple of questions that we got through the chat. Yeah, just scrolling up. Everybody's been very great at participating. So, how can clinicians effectively assess the reliability and safety of AI CDSS tools, especially when many lack Health Canada approval?
Oh, and if you wanted to look at that, or
I'm
happy to.
happy to. So I was reading something in the chat. Taylor, will you say the beginning again?
Sure. So, how can clinicians effectively assess the reliability and safety of AI CDSS tools?
So it's really tricky. It will help us all enormously for some of the larger pieces in the system to start to fall into place, like, for instance, Ontario Health has its verified solutions. And so as we start to see more system level vetting processes, that will really help. The vendor of record process is happening right now for AI scribes in Ontario. And so those types of things will be really, really important. And Mohammed, I'm sure you have a perspective on this, because the system and the system will help to drive the market to where it needs to be for clinician use, trust, confidence, and support. And so right now it is very much a Wild West, but the more clinicians understand and advocate for the things that they need, that helps the system identify where those gaps are, where if there's no regulation, there can still be a step where, for instance, a provincial body will put out request an RFID and say vendors need only apply if they are willing to if they can meet these criteria and are willing to work their product up to a space where it meets these criteria that are important for clinicians. So I think that will be a big piece. But just to be really transparent, it is so difficult right now. And even with some of the knowledge, what did we call them? What is true, the knowledge information infrastructure pieces that look simple. there's a lot of stuff out there that looks very shiny and is not great. The information's not great. So it's a really difficult space.
Yeah, I think that's true. And as you get things regulated and you get a stamp put on, then I think that will help us. I sort of reflect on what Jeremy presented, right? I think if we could actually just show, what this is, if we have a way to compare for clinicians in terms of what this tool is looking to do, what is it based on, what information is it giving you, then you can actually look at making a decision about it. So for example, if something is identifying patients that meet certain criteria, then as a clinician, you can use that. So if I have something that identifies patients who have had any risk factor for diabetes or have had like gestational diabetes and it just flags those patients for follow-up, that's a great thing, because then it's hard for me to keep track of all my patients and understand who's at the highest risk. And if a tool does that, then as a clinician, I can take the next step. And so I think there's ways for tools to help clinicians uh, identify blind spots, where then the clinician can take the next step, where the clinician will go through a standard process to identify the patient who needs an intervention or needs further testing. So I think I want to say, like, there is promise to sharing information with clinicians, where then the clinician can put into the clinician decision making. But to make a decision for a clinician and to not have the rationale for that decision, I think is a big risk, and I think we need to be very careful about that. Back to you, Taylor.
Perfect. Thank you both. So another question in the Q&A. So has LLM chain of thought been considered to help with transparency from generative models?
So maybe
But I'm going to let you start on this one.
Yeah. So I think chain of thought is really, really great in terms of rationalizing why you make a decision, and putting that in front. And I did sort of respond to the chat a little bit. I think it's like, how is that presented to a clinician? Does that actually make sense to a clinician? Can a clinician follow that through? A lot of these systems may not be able to actually do that. I think that's the reality of some of these systems. They won't be able to, because they're comparing features and they're looking at why one thing is different than another thing, and then they sort of come up with an answer without exactly knowing all of those features. And so I think it's sort of like the cats and the dogs, right? So as you look at machine learning, you can identify you can be a tutor to the AI and identify what's the difference between a cat and a dog. But when you get into deep learning, the AI figures it out itself, and it may not be able to articulate that. And I'll give you one quick example. If there is, if you're doing a bunch of chest X-rays, and you have blue people and green people, and the green people are more likely to get pneumonia, then the AI will actually associate other features of the green people with pneumonia, and it will say this person has pneumonia even though the chest X-ray looks pristine, because other features that the green people have are then associated with the higher risk of pneumonia. So we have to be very cautious about these models, because there is a black box nature to many of them. But I think if you can get that chain of thought and you can sort of put that forward, then I think that's great. I will say in many cases you won't be able to do that, is my understanding, and I'm happy to hear from other people, because there's certainly people like way more knowledgeable than me on this.
Thank you. Okay. Another one in the Q&A. Any knowledge-based AI CDSS examples?
I would love it if there are some. And Derek Ritz is on this call, and he's been active in the chat. So Derek, if you know some, then those would be a lovely unicorn in the space right now.
Yeah, similar. Like, if we can, I think it's great. Like, if you can let us know those things, and we'd love to take a look at them.
And there are a couple of questions sort of related to this about, oh God, where did my train of thought just go? Yeah, about how tools are being made, the incentives for vendors right now. And there's a really interesting thing and theme that we've been thinking about, which is, oh, for God's sake. Hold on. So someone put in the chat that it's very difficult to be transparent with AI tools when proprietary vendor, product information is in there. And one of the things that we've been thinking about is that this is just my little sense, is that if it cannot be clinically transparent and auditable in the way that it needs to be, then that sounds to me like AI has been integrated in parts of the process where it shouldn't be. If parts of it are proprietary about how you say, for instance, like synthesize evidence or do something like that, that sounds to me like things have been outsourced to the algorithm that probably would create a better product if they were not outsourced to the algorithm. This is just me editorializing for a moment, but I think it's a really interesting, it's kind of an interesting little chicken and egg. But my hope is that vendors will understand and move towards a space where it is not useful to create a product that's not auditable by the audience, because that is a foundation of trust. And I think right now we're seeing a lot of excitement in the space and a lot of AI for the sake of novelty in many tools. And we will start to see, once this kind of first, like a little .com boom, once this one is over, I think we will start to see, I hope, products moving into the space that are much more sort of trust forward, as opposed to rushing to be first to the market.
Awesome. I think we might have time for a couple more questions here. So one that came through in the Q&A was, how can we safely implement clinical support before biases with clinical research are reasonably addressed, i.e. lack of consideration and inclusion of Black and or female patients in test subject pools?
I'm happy to start with that one. Like we need to do better studies, like that include and overrepresent the populations that have been marginalized and are hard to often get into these studies, and we need that data. Really, I think the best we can, there are ways to supplement, amend a data set, add sort of other things, and some of the techniques are beyond me, to be honest. But there are ways that you can do that. But to me, really, it's about being very clear about what the model is based on, what data, what are the characteristics of the data. Just like as a clinician, any study I look at, I understand which patients participate in the study, and then I look at, okay, which of my practice patients should that apply to? And unfortunately, we generalize that sometimes, and it's actually not appropriate, because we treat patients who don't actually who we don't actually know if the outcomes are good or not. And so I think, as similar for research studies, we need to have a focus on making sure we have a representative data set. I don't know, Anne or Diana, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would add to that so firmly wearing my medical librarian hat, this is something that is top of mind for us, and knowing that all research is not created equal. So it always gives us pause when we read about products or talk to vendors, and they just sort of open the floodgates on the back end to invite all research in and then synthesize it without too much hard look at the information pool that they're gathering. I'm especially thinking about the emergency alert system. I am thinking a lot about what is happening down south and the changes that are being put in place by, for a long time, the global leader in the production of medical research, and what, like, AI tools accelerate aspects of the evidence to practice pipeline. And so we need to be so cautious if something is going to go so fast and be automated about what is being fed to the machine.
Awesome. Well, I think I will cut it off here just because we're getting close to the end. Thank you, Taylor, for moderating. That was awesome. You did a great job. And thank you to the rest of our presenters for coming out today. I'm just going to share my screen and I will set up this poll. So we have two polls today. One is the regular satisfaction poll, which I will launch here. You should see it on your screen now. If you could just take a minute or so, a couple seconds to answer the satisfaction poll on this webinar today. Let us know. We love to hear all of your thoughts. It really helps us on all of our future webinars as well to kind of gauge what our viewers like, what they don't like. So if you could just take a couple of seconds, that would be great. All right, thank you all for taking this poll. On the topic of polls, we do have a second one here. If you follow the QR code, this is the satisfaction survey that has to do with the Main Pro Plus credit. So if you are interested in getting a Main Pro Plus credit, you can follow this survey, let us know about the presentation and your thoughts on that. So I will just leave that up there for a second. If you are interested in doing the survey and don't have a chance to scan this QR code, it will be sent through email after, so you can look out for that as well. Oh, and there's my little motion. Okay. Ooh, how do I go next? There we go. Okay. Next up, we have for our members that are joining us today, we do have the community hub that is for our members. You can go log in at digitalhealthcanada.com. And I know we've been having a lot of questions about whether or not this will be recorded. For our members, you can access this recording as well as all of our past and our future webinars are located in the community hub. So you can go check that out, log in, see them all in the resource section. You can also get news updates as well about things that are going on in the Digital Health Canada world, as well as you can talk to your fellow members. So it's a great community. So you can check that out at digitalhealthcanada.com. And then next we have our eHealth 25, which is our big event coming up. Oh, sorry about that. It is from June 1st to 3rd. We would love to see you all there. Registration is open until May 31st, which is surprisingly getting very close. So register for that until the day before eHealth 25 starts. We are very excited to see hopefully all of you there. And it's going to be a great event, so come on out. It's in Toronto, so hopefully it's close for a lot of you. If not, maybe you can make the flight out. All right, and I will just say thank you once again to both Amplify Care and for CEP for coming out today and for doing an amazing presentation. I know that a lot of you were looking for getting a copy of the presentation as well. So you can contact webinars at digitalhealthcanada.com and I will send out the slide deck. I'll get that from Probably Jeremy, I'm assuming. So he will send me that and then I can send that out to you guys as well. So if you're interested, that is webinars@digitalhealthcanada.com. So thank you all for being here today. And thank you once again to our presenters, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.